Ian, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm joined by a special guest, Ino from Nerd Kingdom this evening. He's here to answer some questions for us about the game.
Hello.
First and foremost, Ino, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got started at Nerd Kingdom on Tug? Maybe a little bit about any sort of prior experience or education you've got?
Sorry, I totally smacked my button real quick here. So question, experience, background, education, everything that applies in Nerd Kingdom.
Yeah, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started at Nerd Kingdom.
I'm an academic dropout because I got really bored with academic banter, and I got into the business side of things. I was adopted by the devil, otherwise known as venture capitalists, because I was a very mouthy behavioral scientist. And picked me up, and then they brought me around, and I got to see the ins and outs of the idiocy that is venture capital. That's not to apply to everybody, but just big tech businesses as a whole. And we got involved in a couple projects with EA and Activision, and the primary focus was helping them. This is about 7 years ago. Was helping publishers understand psychologically what was going on within the community and gamers. And this was kind of a novel thing back then because basically social networking wasn't really a thing almost a decade ago. This is relatively new. They wanted to understand, it was a novel idea at the time, how do you make what they looked at as a product, quote unquote, psychologically appropriate for a user. And it was strange because that theory was almost unheard of. How do you make one thing that is supposed to be for millions of people when millions of people are very different? How do you make something for everyone? And the conclusion was, well, you just couldn't. But the best way to create something realistically for anyone or anyone making a game was to take into consideration your user, who it was, and taking insider input. Researching for nearly a decade about who gamers were and what they were doing, we realized that gamers weren't just gamers, and even for ourselves, we were... Sorry, I got children screaming in the back.
It's understandable.
We're a society, right? We're people, we function, we reside within virtual environments, and we do things. And the more that the internet became social, the more that we found that we were able to organize and orchestrate our voices. And this is when it started to really emerge that, well, hey, we aren't just consumers. We're really people that like to reside someplace and create our own cultures and societies and solve problems together. And then we became louder and louder and louder. And the louder we became, the more apparent it became like, well, look, we're not idiots. We're collaborating. We're becoming more sophisticated. And in spite of all the chaos we thought the internet was, we are developing our own structured societies. And it was really exciting. And then Minecraft happened, and it was phenomenal because when Minecraft came along, it not only was a phenomenal success, but it also proved out every bit of theoretical research we'd ever done in quantified sciences. We got to see that given the freedom, the community would organize and orchestrate themselves. We got to see different cultures and competitions and research happen from this thing because essentially Minecraft was this very open platform. And it was incredibly exciting, all circumstantial, but phenomenal. And when we tried to reach out to Mojang and some of the modding community, it wasn't quite as receptive we would have liked to because, we sound like a bunch of loons, like, hey, we want to do crazy people science inside of a video game, and that didn't make much sense. So we started working with modders, and we got to see a lot of fun stuff happening, and a lot more research was starting to prove itself out, and it was amazing because what a novel idea, right? Making a world for somebody, heaven forbid, you shouldn't listen to them. But it started to actually come together. And we realized that there were a lot of things we wanted to do that just Minecraft didn't do. And other games as well. It wasn't just Minecraft. It was like Animal Crossing and Monster Hunter and World of Warcraft and all these amazing things that we had years of information from. And it gave us an opportunity to see that not only were we playing games, but we were solving problems. And it was amazing because we were solving problems about how to learn, how to be social, how to collaborate, how to compete, how to stop being quote unquote douchebags on the internet, how to stop being trolls, but also how to deal with problems, how to deal with conflict. Games were educating us all over the place. And it was all from play. It wasn't a matter of us learning how to do these things from quote unquote learning games. It was a matter of us learning from playing games. And that was a novel idea for academics as a whole. So we started building, but we were building differently because we're gamers first before anything else, and we knew that in order to do something functionally or entertaining, it had to be fun because we wanted to play in a world or an environment that. Excuse me, 1 second. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I still have a family that I'm running around with here.
It's fine, man. Don't even apologize. It's perfectly fine.
So we had to, start deconstructing what we understood "quote unquote" fun was. And it's weird because when you look at fun academically or scientifically, you start seeing numbers, and it's almost this very Matrix-esque effect. And it's beautiful and creepy at the same time because you can see firsthand that everything we do or don't do can be quantified. It can be given a figure, let's say 1 through 10 theoretically. And the more things that we do over time reveal a more in-depth formula of who we are. And the more we do by ourselves is phenomenal. But the more we did socially is even more exciting because that is what society is for us. It's sociality. And that was the best interpretation for fun because we got to see that, okay, you can do so much in the game. You can spend so much time scripting AI or monsters or dungeons or what have you. But the reality was that real fun, real engaging experiences came from people. They came from others because it was infinitely dynamic, right? When they're motivators and things that directed fear or influence for success or happiness or sadness, that all came from being social, right? This is the amazing things happen all over the internet, right? Some of the most exciting things we find on the internet right now are unique experiences or funny things that happen that we never expected. Now, when you script a game or an environment, those things are expected because they're predetermined, essentially. Sure, you have multiple choices for a story, but that's where it ends, right? The few choices, and then you get a wiki together, and it is what it is. But you cannot put a wiki together for social interactions. We've been trying for 1,000 years in academia to do it, and it's never going to happen. Because there's so many new influences that come into play that socially change everything that we know and do, right? And that's the beauty of the evolution of who we are as people, is that
Right.
it's no longer about the evolution of us as human beings or the genetics. It's about the evolution of our psyche, right? How we adapt to different cultures and demographics and cultures online. And it's almost like watching an entire species on the internet evolve several thousand times more rapidly than we ever could have done without it. And that's fun, and it's scary as shit, but it's the coolest thing in the world because seeing that information happen could help us theoretically solve world problems. It could help us understand what facilitates rage, what facilitates again, collaboration, competition, things that we do in video games could give us real world insights. And wow, that really dragged on. But it was all this passion our group had as academics and game developers from different areas that wanted to make this thing happen. So we all strapped down. We some of us kept jobs on the side. We just kept building. We started researching tech. We went out with a few amazing people and a few horrible, scary people. People took advantage of us. People were helpful. It's to be said when you put yourself out. You're gonna run into some interesting people that are gonna be, for better or worse, there to do something with you. And that's where we are now. We put it on Kickstarter. It was interesting because we intentionally launched on Kickstarter, having not talked about the people in the team who played video or who actually made video games. We've had people who worked with World of Warcraft. With a few, I'm sorry, I'm like totally lost right now. I know they have a pretty impressive backgrounds of things, but we do have a lot of vet developers and artists on the team, and we intentionally did not mention them because we had to see, well, is our proposition compelling enough in a community with no exposure? And it proved that it was, and it was exciting by itself.
Right, rather than trying to ride on some of the qualifications of the other developers and such, you rather let the game speak for itself and see how the community responds.
Right, exactly. So now we have accumulated some people. Like we're technically we're a business because we have a structure, we have a legal formation as a way for us to protect ourselves. We do have a quote-unquote board of directors, but really it's just a group of advisors of like retired executives from the space, and they're great because when we met with them, they were totally baffled by who we were and what we did. We said, hey, we're science people and we make video games and we want to be designers and developers. They had no idea what we're talking about. So we showed them, we said, okay, look, here's what's happening in the industry right now. And this is about a year ago. We said, here's what's happening in the industry right now. We can forecast with roughly 90% accuracy what's going to happen in the next 6 months. Okay, well, how are you going to do that? Okay, well, here's how. And they didn't understand it. We said, okay, look, bottom line is if we can prove that we're right, will you please help us? And we did. We put together a regression model, and we showed some of the possibilities and the outcomes and a few variations of what those outcomes may be and how the community and culture would respond. And we were fairly accurate. And they called us back and said, okay, you're right. What do you need? And I said, well, hey, we could use some guidance for one, and access to capital if we need it. And they said, sure, you got it. And they are so intimidated, scared, and confused by what we do that they don't ever bother screwing with us. They basically like, okay, what do you need? This? Okay, I'm gonna walk away now. And
just give you the tools to hang yourself, right?
And it's been phenomenal. It's also a little bit scary too, because sometimes we're not smarter than anybody else. We just have different knowledge base than most other people do. So sometimes the board misinterprets that, or other advisors or friends misinterpret that. They think that we're infallible or can't make mistakes. Well, we totally make mistakes. We make mistakes all the time, and we're not the smartest people in the world. But the only thing we know how to do is be completely transparent, because we do want to say, look, we're just a bunch of people, and we're going to make mistakes, and we're trying to do this with everybody so we can get better insight into doing it. And it's proven to be more effective that way, it seems. You know, we have a more of a human element as a culture, as opposed to more of a business culture. And again, it's also a lot of the reason why we're trying to make it very clearly we're collaborative people. You know, there's no one person that answers to anybody. Certainly, some people, you know, natural leaders evolve. Of course, it has to be with any group or society or culture. But we never really stick anybody somewhere that isn't comfortable there, doesn't want to be there in the first place.
Right.
So yeah, it's just been all kinds of crazy and super exciting, but yeah, that's ugh. Sorry, so much word vomit. It's like this is almost like therapy for me right now, because we don't really get a chance to like talk and vent and do interviews like this.
No, and we really appreciate any and all information you have to share. So please don't hold back at all. One of the questions that we've had pretty consistently in all formats from
Sure.
viewers, from players rather, from fans of the game. A lot of these questions you may have already answered before, and some of them I might be paraphrasing quite a bit because I can't afford to ask 100 questions here. But
Sure.
a lot of the fans have expressed their concern about some of their friends and family members and such being able to play the game as a result of what some would say rather high-end system requirements for at least this initial portion of the game. So the
Right.
question really becomes, is there any plans, or are there any plans, I suppose I should say, for toning back the system requirements as the game becomes optimized? Is there some further optimization down the pipe planned in order to allow lower-end hardware to play the game, or what can we expect with regard to that?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly are going to be scaling back a little bit with some features and systems, but we have to keep in mind that since we're a small team, we have to have a linear path going forward until it's self-sustaining, and then we can start making those changes. We can scale it back to DX10 and allow more people to play. We have to take a lot of sacrifices. We can take out the shadows, or we have the option to take the shadows out completely. We have the option to take out different systems. What those systems are specifically, that's more to the programmers to make those calls. I'm not fully equipped to say what can and can't be done, not just because I'm not as technical as them, but because this is a relatively new technology. Well, granted, voxels have been around for a while, but the way these things are being implemented is not something that you see very often. So there are a lot of things that we do experiment with right now too. Something that we may not see now may become a great opportunity later. Some things like moving the terrain generation to the GPU, for instance, may make some changes. As far as optimization as a whole, though, it may be looked at as irrelevant for the most part. If you have under the circumstances you have an old machine, like if you're running like a dual core, like it's a very old generation processor. It's unfortunate, but you got to keep in mind this thing is supposed to be future proofed, quote unquote. We're talking about this tech being ready in 18 months. And I think a lot of people think that graphics have everything to do with your hardware, and that's not necessarily the case. A lot more often, it has to do with information being processed, hence the function of a processor. In a world like this, where information is constantly changing, like terrain, for instance, you're going to use a lot of that hardware. It's going to get soaked up, and it's there's a good reason why not every game allows you to deform the terrain. And this is it's all information. We're going to do everything we can. That's the best we can tell anybody, in all honesty, is we do want as many people to be involved with the tech as possible. But you also have to be realistic about it, and remember that if we want to push a quote-unquote next-gen amazing game where anything can happen, the reality is you can do anything in a video game. The question is, can a hardware handle doing anything in a video game? Right, and that's the thing that people are missing. And why games don't do everything to begin with.
Sure, that's totally understandable. And I know if we do come across a question that you just don't have the technical expertise, or that's not really part of what you do, so you're not really sure, anything like that, please don't hesitate to say that, and we'll just move on, because I am trying to ask. If you write those things down,
I'll hand them to one of our architects or one of the leads on the tech side, and then we'll put them up, and you can post them on one of your channels or go over them and do a VO or something.
Okay, well that's perfect, because I've gotten all the majority of the questions all written down already. So something else that a lot of people I'm trying to reach the most popular questions first.
Sure.
Something else that a lot of people seem to touch on is they're concerned with, in terms of the alpha itself, they're concerned with the experience during the alpha. Let's say, for example, I've just got into the alpha this week, and they're concerned with, if I play it now and help test it and write bug reports and so on and so on, is this going to ruin my gameplay down the line because I'm going to have explored all there is to explore? And I know something that we've discussed at length previously has been, obviously, this is not the end result by any means.
Sure.
So there's so much ahead of us. My question to you, to be more precise, would be, in terms of the generation of the world, okay, from a pure exploration standpoint, there is reinforced for me the idea that there is so much more that will be added in over time and so on, other features and such that we're just not even able to see right now in the current generation of the alpha.
Well, you got to keep in mind, like, really what this is. It's a demonstration of technology, point blank, period. That's it. Demonstration of technology, and it is an added convenience that this technology allows you to build things, which is why it's in a creative mode, purely creative. The thing that's important for this kind of project to remember, and the reason these social scientists or economists are involved in this, is gameplay, really. It's about prepping the landscape for human interaction and or interaction with non-playable characters that offer some kind of compelling interactions that make it feel more dynamic. Granted, things exist there, but the interaction with those things aren't there. And the change of one system or function can change everything after the fact. For instance, running around punching trees right now and they just explode. That won't always be the case. Right now not this very moment we're not, but we have in our pipeline developing a physics system to allow trees to be chopped down and actually fall over and have damage on the players around them. Now that one feature changes a lot of interactions. That's one thing. There is, of course, the addition to different materials and to crafting of logic systems and being able to create your own quote-unquote factories with machines and companions and energy and power systems. These are all things that make it feel like a game, right? This is the gameplay element. And when the gameplay comes in, it makes everything feel very different. A glowing crystal right now is nothing more than an aesthetic, but what you can do with a glowing crystal as far as refining it or using it for energy or building tools or weapons, the way the game feels is what makes the world compelling, or what will make the world compelling, because it will be a game at that point. Will you see everything? No, that's theoretically impossible, being that the world can be generated at what is, I believe, and don't quote me, something close to 2 times the surface of the sun. So that's, an infinitely generated terrain. Yeah, that's
certainly something you're not going to explore in a couple of months. Okay.
Granted, you will see a lot of the biomes, which is going to happen, and this is the trade-off that we're asking the users to make, and while we're asking for help with the alpha. That's not always clear to everybody who buys alpha. They think it's early access to a game and first dibsies, but really, like, we were very sincere when we said, look, we need help. We need feedback. We need interactions. We need to understand. We need you guys to help supplement the loss of staff we have by helping us report bugs and letting us understand as testers what should and shouldn't be done and what our priorities should be. So that's a reality of it. You know, there's no silver lining aside from being able to post videos before somebody else does, really, at this point anyway.
Right. It looks like another really popular aspect of conversation is about, has a lot to do, and the next couple of questions I'll have for you will have a lot more to do with the multiplayer aspects of
Sure.
of the game. Now, I don't know if you're at liberty to discuss right now what any kind of developments have already been made towards a multiplayer functionality of the game, but some of these folks are concerned with, like, for example, how the chat system is going to work for the multiplayer functionality. As far as, like, I know from reading other information on the site and such that you've said before, it's going to be a real localized chat. People are concerned, it looks like, with wondering how they're going to be able to communicate with their friends. Let's say they're not near them in the multiplayer server. How do you propose that players will be able to communicate with one another in global sense?
Well, that's not the only gameplay, quote unquote, or the own server or gameplay type we're creating. That's in survival mode. That's a little bit more harsh and for the extreme, and that is made with the intention of enforcing certain types of behaviors and responses. Like an adventure map, for instance, would play out a lot more like a traditional role-playing game where there's global chats and trolling and what have you, and you can have at it. But again, the details here are what are significant, because the survival map and the adventure map and whatever we do with the glitch community, these things are just mods. That's all they are. And we're giving every tool that we have access to the community to build whatever they want. So it's not that it's set in stone that it's a global chat system, it's that it's our mod. That's what we want to build for our system, because those interactions are incredibly interesting, right? And you have to think, and this is the weird thing about people who expect products versus people who look through interactions. Think about how you solve problems when you're forced to be near somebody when you communicate, right? Think about,
Right.
You know, when you're in and I had an interview with Massily, we talked about this, and it was kind of funny. Like, I am guilty of a few guild mutinies. Like, I have led a few breakups of guilds because I'm very competitive and very aggressive, and I like progression because I don't have time to fool around. And it's very easy to do because you send a few emails, or you know, you go in voice chat, you have a whisper, and it's not a big deal. But how neat would it be if actual communication with somebody was, like, it really took your consideration of how you were talking to them or when you were talking to them, or somebody overheard you. Like, that's a dynamic that just doesn't exist right now in play. I mean, look at the success of DayZ. Arguably, the one thing that made that incredibly compelling and again arguable is proximity-based communication, because you had no idea what was going on. You had no idea what to do until you were within actionable distance of somebody. When you were close enough
Right.
to say hello, you were close enough to get punched in the face and run off with your beads, or I guess more appropriately, shot in the face. You know, this one design choice is calculated, and it needs to be balanced with a lot of other design choices as well. So this could not effectively exist without a loadout system or an encumbrance system, or certain balancing systems, or mathematical statistics. These things are all carefully planned out. And while it won't be for everybody, we encourage everybody to try it. Because sure, it may be tough and difficult and frustrating, but playing a game this way where you have to actually solve problems means that you're going to get better at solving problems. And that's something you can take to your parents. Like, hey, you know, I'm playing a game made by scientists to make me suck less at everyday stuff, Mom. You can't even say shit to me. And that's probably not what you should say to your parents ever. But, you know, we are in a position as mathematicians and scientists and engineers where we can create back-end statistics that say, hey, look, you played this game and you got pwned this many times, but look, you have increased your critical thinking by this percentage, generally speaking, or you have increased problem solving, or you have now learned to deal with conflict in different ways. And of course, it comes down to people applying their understandings of playing these video games with a quote-unquote logical or realism aspect to them, and saying, look, hey, this is how I solve problems in this video game, and I can take this to work, or I can take this to school, or I can take this to my family reunion where my awkward aunt doesn't stop pinching my cheeks. You know, these are all ways of dealing with conflict in video games.
Right.
The one thing that I think it's interesting to think about for me anyway. What would games be like if we stopped dumbing them down for people? Think about your process for education. Think about entitlement, as the spoiled brat children, we see it all the time, or we watch it in movies, where you start raising somebody or interacting with somebody, and the first thing you do is say, "Hey, buddy, let me hold your hand." And whether or not you needed to have your hand held, you're going to become accustomed to that way of doing things, right? Now you're accommodating, and this is going to happen. Now they expect you to accommodate at every turn. So now, a company or culture or group, your job is no longer making compelling content. Your job is accommodation, right? And you see this happen. Well, WoW is lame now, and WoW is easy, and this is dumb. It's for noobs. Well, of course it is, because they started developing this world based on accommodation, and it became nothing but becoming answerable to people as opposed to challenging them or encouraging them to solve their own problems. But you see them doing it anyway, right? The modders do it. They solve problems by making better map UIs, by making action bars. In Dota, they do it by making different skins. And League of Legends doesn't do it really, but they have communities that solve problems, right? They put statistical systems. They make different communities that make more sense for them. And this is because they were presented with a problem themselves, and they solved it. And that's an amazing idea, that if you encourage somebody to solve a problem, it becomes this cultural thing, this social thing. Now it's cool to solve problems. Taking a step back to Minecraft again, it was all about solving problems. And we as people, as human beings, as a species, we're programmed to solve problems. That's why we've advanced much faster than we probably should have, given our environment. We get a chance to say, okay, it's now cool to solve a problem. I can make a redstone elevator. It's phenomenal. It's become social. Now everybody gets to see what my knowledge is. And I can scale that to factors of infinity, because I now have become quote unquote an educator by title, but really it was just me figuring something out, and it felt rewarding, and other people found it rewarding, and I'm now encourage other people to solve problems as well. Right now, and calculating those problems is also significant, because this learning is in fact a science itself. Right? Bad education is why people fail in school. It's why people get frustrated with our educators. A lot of cookie cutter curriculums. Understanding how people learn is important, because we all learn very differently. Now, when you have a community of potentially thousands of people solving problems in YouTube or in forums or in Twitter or asking questions, we now in effect have a community of theoretically thousands of educators. And we're learning, right? We're learning not just playing video games, but we're learning social sciences. We're learning biology, we're learning genetics. I mean, we have the potential to learn these things in a fun fantasy environment, so long as it scales the same logic or quote-unquote realism. We can take those common understandings in the video game and apply them to understandings in schools, and we see it happen all the time. But again, academics don't really make fun games. Academics make awkward web-based games that maybe get 1,000 people, and they do phenomenal for those 1,000 people. But we haven't yet found that convergence, the collaboration of people from those different fields to make a world fun, compelling, rewarding, and challenging at the same time.
Something else that struck me while I was reading through a lot of these questions that we received was something that actually I had felt curious about as well, was that how about, let's talk for a second about the name of the game. Obviously,
Sure.
we have it titled TUG. It stands for the unnamed or untitled game. Some people have referred to it as. Is this sort of like a play for you guys as far as the name is concerned? Is this just a placeholder name before maybe when release comes, you guys are concerned with renaming it to something more appealing, or are you satisfied with the name TUG and what it stands for?
It's one of our many experiments that people aren't necessarily aware of. Calling it TUG was calculated because it was untitled and it's fun, and it really is. It's the game itself. The engine is a platform, and we want people to create with it. But we also had made it difficult to identify what TUG actually was, because it created more questioning, and it created a problem for the community. And their form of solution was creating their own names. And for a project that claims infinite modability, or excuse me, not infinite modability, but a lot of modability, we thought it'd be kind of fun for us to pat ourselves on the back to say, well, look, they've already started modding the title. I mean, that's a good start. So now we have a forum post actually that might end up being a T-shirt, where people take a crack at what they think the Untitled game actually meant. And it was like the uncanny gerbil, the ugly gorilla, the the uncouth giraffe. I mean, there's just like tons of
Yeah.
names that came out that were phenomenal. It was a lot of fun for us because really, I mean, a lot of these problems that we present are not all of them, but a lot of them are calculated problems because we need to understand. Well, okay, here's how we can create a problem now and contain it and control it, so we know how to deal with the problems in the future. And this is, we have to even take into consideration here, we're information people. We don't like making a lot of assumptions without a lot of information first. And yeah, it was a lot of fun just doing it. Now, again, taking a step back, understanding that the survival and adventure games are kind of their own mods, it's very realistic that we're going to name those mods something different in accordance to what the modders in the community want to do. I think it probably makes a lot of sense for Tug, the platform, the technology, to be Tug, because it's essentially an untitled game until somebody takes it and makes it their own.
Right.
Now, we're not saying we're going to do that because we really do genuinely believe the community should say what happens. And if they all unanimously think it's something different, then it will be. What we'll do is we'll present a case and we'll say, hey, look, here's what it is. Here's why we think it is this. And here's why we named it this initially. And here's what we think you guys can do with it. And here are the pros and cons. Here, make an informed decision. And then from that, we'll let them rant and rave and throw fits and, cause small civil wars over it. And it's going to be a lot of fun watching it. And then we'll come to a conclusion over time. Now, if this were like government, it'd take years and years and years. But being that it's online government, it takes roughly a day or two before we know who's hit the floor and ran off and who's embezzled money. And then, we're good to go.
There's been a lot of discussion both on the forums and amongst the community members that I'm familiar with about the possible extension of the alpha test. What do you think about that sort of a thing happening? And furthermore, don't you think, or rather I should say, do you think, I shouldn't really imply what your views are, do you think that extending the alpha test is a beneficial for the project, or do you think that it's something that could potentially harm it?
That could go either way, really. I mean, one is exposure is important, obviously, for us. We want to sustain without having to bring on a bunch of investors and losing control and it's not being fun anymore. The last thing we want this to do is be a cash grab, so we have to consider exposure first. We need to balance that, obviously, with the quality of what we're building and the quality of our interactions with the core community we're building around the alpha. It's beneficial in the sense that is additional time that allows us to ask questions 2 or 3 times to understand any potential variants or variables we may have missed. It's not beneficial because we have a bunch of beta people that want to get in and a lot of people who can help us spread the word about the project. It also, it's one of those matters of procrastination. Do you really have to push alpha back? Is it acceptable enough and polished enough in the current state to then move on to the next phase? We say 6 months in beta it because that gives us some breathing room to get things done. Really, for us, the big milestone, unofficially, again, all this is very unofficial because we don't want to stick too much to details, is when multiplayer comes in and there are very compelling interactions between people. That is when beta essentially starts in our head. Because that is a different kind of data set. It's no longer about understanding the core technology or whether things are buggy. It's about, okay, now it's literally millions upon millions of potential interactions that we have to start testing in very different ways. So that's what segments those things.
Okay. Well, something that I think a lot of people are really wondering at this point in time would be, as far as, let's talk survival for a minute.
Sure.
As far as the survival aspect or mode of gameplay, if you will, people are really concerned with the timing of when something playable for survival would become available. My pointed question is, do you expect, or I guess expectations are a little something we probably shouldn't go after.
Sure.
Do you think that it might be possible for us to see some kind of iteration on survival mode during the alpha, or should we expect that be something more beta-ish? Or
that's more beta-ish. Yeah, it's not really to say alpha yet because alpha is not about that. Alpha is about refining technology. What you guys see right now looks okay. It's definitely not as beautiful as we'd like it to be. What alpha is about is really making this thing gorgeous. It's about making it beautiful. Applying things like normal maps and specular maps are going to be coming in line pretty quick here. And Brent, I think, he's one of our programmers, and I think he's kind of trolling the conversation too to yell at me if I say anything wrong. a lot of very small changes in the technology or additional features in the technology can dramatically change the environment and by extension make a more emotional connection to the environment itself, and that's what we're trying to go for right now. Once those things are perfected, that gives us a chance to really focus on art and do the first phase of interactions, a lot of tools that are quote unquote playable to be applied. And then, yeah, I mean, it won't be survival because that takes a lot more planning for gameplay and refinement. But it'll be a lot of fun things you can do, right? Because movements will be in, animations will be running, building and crafting systems in the first phases will be in, and you guys will be able to mod it yourselves as well because the tools will be there. And it's likely you guys will probably make gameplay before we do because, again, we're trying to focus on building the tools that allow you guys to do those things. That's our number one priority. The survival and adventure is super fun for us, but again, there's no point in doing it unless we have the tools that we know are going to make it the best thing it can be.
Sure, yeah. What do you think about the systems for the AI in the game? I had one pointed question come up about how the creatures and stuff in the world are going to spawn. They suggested, or moreover asked, if they would act like mobs in Minecraft, for example, where they might only spawn in the darkness, or if we can expect sort of a very lively world full of creatures all over the place.
It won't necessarily be like Minecraft. I mean, the only similarity that we really have to Minecraft is there's crafting and you can build stuff. Aside from that, we're not looking to make a game where you can punch trees and just have things happen sporadically like that. There certainly will be things that go bump in the night, but only because it's a fantasy world and it'll be a lot of fun to work that way. We do have psychologists that have studies into fear, so we definitely will be playing into that a little bit. We are trying to develop as robust and ecological system as we possibly can within the world. Spawning of creatures will be somewhat more logical, as in certain beasts will spawn at certain heights or around certain types of plants that may be within their diets. They may be around only during certain seasons. They may be around other animals that may be part of their diet. There's a large mathematical formula that is applied to it that allows those things to be more consistent and logical. Some creatures may spawn at incredibly rare times that very few, if any, people will ever see one for the next couple of years. We are having a day and night cycle, not necessarily a really rapid one. It could be anywhere between 11 and 24-hour day and night cycles, and there will be seasons that are implemented to some extent, and different creatures will be spawning during different seasons. And goodness, it may take several sacrifices of a certain creature and their pelt and boiling of their blood in some weird, very complex ritual to summon some kind of other demon nobody's ever seen before. And we expect to make a lot of systems that are very complex because we want to see what the capacity for understanding or challenging that complexity is. Of course, not everything will be as simple as just experimentation. Some experimentation will come at a great cost or a lot of loss. So again, theoretically thousands of people, hopefully hundreds of thousands of people will try to solve these problems and to take those risks. And the people that do it will be legendary. And the people that fail will be part of a social lesson to help other people understand how not to fail. So again, backtracking, the spawning of creatures will be more consistent with the environment as opposed to just having things pop up in the daytime and the nighttime.
And it's going to be sort of a logical way it works.
Right.
Okay.
Logic and consistency are very important for us.
So in terms of moving on to a different subject, in terms of the animations, I know animations were a sore subject right at the initial launch of Alpha because they were kind of pulled away at the last minute there because they weren't quite ready. A lot of people are asking, as far as the animations are concerned, are we likely to see maybe a preview of said animations in a video or something like that? Or
you won't have to. That's one of the systems we're working on right now. It'll be in pretty darn soon. We can just say that for now.
Okay.
Don't worry too much about that one. I understand it's been a sore part for us all. There's just been like small details that we overlook sometimes, and that's to be said about any kind of technology. We're building this thing from scratch. We don't have the luxury of relying on an engine like Unity or Unreal or what have you. There's a good reason for that too, because we want to build this a very specific way, because we want very specific things to happen. We just couldn't rely on quote unquote a shelf solution for everybody. But having that kind of flexibility with our own technology means we have to do a lot more work and a lot more experimentation, and we're prone to a lot more failure. That's it's just inevitable, unfortunately.
And in along with the animations, I guess I can kind of lump this in there. Um, One of the questions we came across was somebody was wondering if we should expect, when we get these animations and such in the game and the models, I guess, for the player and so on, are we going to have any kind of a third person viewpoint that we can go out and kind of get in touch with our character a little bit, as opposed to just being in this viewpoint where we just see the environment?
Possibly. We know for a fact the first person hands are coming in first. We'll plug in whatever other animations we possibly can right now. You know, we're not going to make any promises about what's going to go in when. We know it'll be soon. That's the best we can do. The positive thing about this is that really the only hiccup was the animations as a system, not necessarily the animations themselves. A lot of the animations are already done. They're queued up, they're synced, they're ready to get plugged in. It's once we get the animations open and function the way we need to, that's when we can just start unloading and plugging all the animation systems in. So those things will happen in rapid successions. And you'll notice that a lot with the technology too. We'll work on a new system, and once that new system is complete, then we can just dump content into it or dump function into it. And you'll see rapid changes happening once those things are done.
Okay. Let's see here. I'm going to try and throw some of the viewer questions in now, some of the questions that perhaps have been asked throughout the stream here. And looks like somebody's concerned about their inventory when they die, with regard to the alpha and I guess add-on items you can get on PayPal and stuff. Whether those types of items, first of all, I guess if your inventory drops when you die, and if so, what about the specialty items that have been purchased as a part of alpha access and so on?
That probably wouldn't be much of a concern for the alpha. Those things are they're not going to have any real meaningful functionality until there's an actual game to play them with. Yes, you can lose those things, but there will be ways for you to bring them back. Whether it be some form of resurrection or a calling quote-unquote spell or some trait system, there will be a unique way to make those things come back to you. There will be some pain of loss, but it won't be a permanent loss.
Okay. Somebody else asked, excuse me, how or if weather will affect your seed via like a debuff or sickness or anything like that.
Yeah, some of those things will exist. I don't want to go into detail because we want to watch how you guys handle parsing through the information. There's a lot of statistics that'll be happening in real time as you're playing that are responsive to temperature or heat or sicknesses, et cetera, and a lot of your body statistics to take into consideration. One of the more interesting things that we're excited to see is how those things get deconstructed when you actually can't see numbers.
Yeah.
So yeah, but they'll be factors for play, certainly.
Okay. Let's see. We know, obviously, we've seen some cave systems and things like some underground cave systems right now. Some real basics of them. Somebody's asked, what about dungeon-like systems with like maybe AI enemies and things like that? Do you have plans in the future? Obviously, not for the alpha, but in the future for like a dungeoning
certainly.
system where there's going to
Yeah,
be enemies.
we can generate dungeons and things like that. They're not unheard of. I mean, roguelike games do it all the time. It's a matter of getting the objects together and putting together the right formulas to make those things generate. They're not in the immediate plans right now. You know, we really we have to just hope for the patience of the community to understand. Like we're a very small team and we're doing things that a lot of even major developers and large groups don't even bother doing or wouldn't even begin to think could be done. So we will focus on one system at a time and make sure it's refined and perfect and polished, and making sure those things work great and allow the modding community to build tools or additional feature or functions with the tools we've created. And then we'll start adding more systems like that. Before a person asks those questions, and we try to encourage the alpha team or the alpha players themselves to think like developers themselves. If we focus on this thing right now, does it make that big of a difference to the community? Will other people take what we have so far, with this feature, and will it change the experience dramatically? Will it help them create more? And if the answer is yes, but maybe not as much as X, Y, or Z, then we have to consider X, Y, and Z first.
Right. Something else that interests me as well is somebody asked about the digital art books, and for more information about the digital art books. That one of the users asked about that.
Oh yeah, we're finishing up putting some of those things together. They should be going out next week. It's basically what we're doing is we're setting up, kind of trying to tell a story, I guess, quote unquote, of how the world has evolved visually for us. And every few months we'll put together what the world is looking like for us visually as a team. Where we're discussing and talking about how it should kind of expand. And some things will be insights into things we're working on, and some things will be insights into things we failed miserably at. But yeah, that stuff will be popping up. We have some great work from some of our artists coming in.
Okay. How about transportation? Let's talk transportation for a second.
Sure.
A lot of people are wondering. I think we've discussed before about this, but correct me if I'm wrong. But we're going to have some kind of a mounting system where you can train something to be a mount for you, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we'll be able to take small animals and have them grow and be able to ride certain ones. Certainly, that's without question. There will be some for teleportation systems. There'll be a method for flying in some capacity. Yeah, it's all there planned to play out like any kind of action platformer type of game.
And so the first thing that came to my mind specifically when I read this question was, what about a system like a rail cart system? That's the first thing I thought of, was digging around
Yeah.
underground and maybe sending supplies back to the surface with a rail cart system or something. Is that something you think you guys would implement yourselves, or maybe leave up to modders to kind of
We would certainly have to
into?
do it ourselves. We'd have to do it ourselves because the one thing that's going to make maybe a lot of people rage is the way that terrain movement is going to happen during survival mode. So it's going to require some kind of rail system to allow you to move masses of terrain from one point to another one.
Because it sounds like it'll just take you all too long to have to do all that by hand
Right.
anyway. So
Yeah.
it sounded like you were suggesting that was the kind of system we would expect to see.
Yeah, you'd have to. A lot of people think. Well, it's funny because we get this question a lot. Like, well, what's going to stop it from looking like Swiss cheese? Or I can't remember the name. It's like Minecraft syndrome or the Minecraft effect. And this is under the assumption that you can just destroy a lot of blocks and carry hundreds of blocks in your backpack. But in a survival mode, that's not the case. You're going to have an encumbrance. You're going to have a limit. You're going to have a maximum amount of space within your backpack that's going to allow you to actually move bits of terrain. So you're going to have to really think about and plan out how you're going to dig something through. Also may take more than one person to actually dig a hole to the other person's base. That's something a lot of people didn't consider because it actually is going to take teamwork to make things actually happen. It's not to say that a person playing on their own can't make things happen, because arguably they can be as efficient or more efficient than being reliant on somebody else. But again, this is one of those things. These are one of these world circumstances that do encourage problem solving and collaboration.
Someone else asked about something that I'm not familiar with myself. They asked for you to talk a bit about influence scores.
Oh, social sciences, influence scoring, the trolls. There's, without drawing up a lot of very boring charts, basically what it comes down to is watching how people act and watching how people respond to how those people act. And those scores become positive or negative, very simply put. And based on how negative or how positive they are, how much they teeter, we can identify whether or not those people are good or bad, quote unquote, good or bad, or positive or negative influences within the community. And with those scores, we can say, okay, well, this guy is a troll because Spud played with him for 4 or 5 times and he left abruptly during these certain events. And every other person that he walks around, it essentially becomes like a plague. You can watch this virus walking around and watching these people just become infected and just their behavior drastically changes for the worse. And that's in a nutshell how influence scoring works.
Okay, and with that in mind, I think that somebody else had asked here about how we're going to solve problems with regard to things like negative behavior amongst the community. Let's say, for example, I'm hosting a server and I have a lot of players on my server, or let's say I have one problematic person on my server. As the from a from a standpoint where I'm the person hosting this server on my, let's say my hardware, am I going to have the ability to take that person out of my game, or is that something you're going to frown upon? Is there going to be some kind of central reporting thing that you're going to have to do to report these kind of people, or what kind of process do you think that that falls under?
Well, if you're talking about like hosting your own survival map kind of thing, or your own
Hmm.
modded map, or what do you mean?
Well, like let's say for example, I'm hosting my own survival server, we'll call it, and I have like 5 friends playing with me, and suddenly some guy comes on and he's destroying the place. Um, my main concern with this question, I guess, is really what are we as players going to be able to do about people like that?
Well, if you're hosting your own server, that means you have access to every tool within the game, so you can do whatever you like. Honestly, the influence scoring applies to our quote unquote official servers, where we will present servers where people can come in and play that we have, because we have the back end databases to plug those numbers and parse the information, but is essentially in real time. Um, as far as how you guys handle them, that's exciting for us, because you guys, we get to see what you guys are changing to handle those problems. What you do or don't do is incredibly up to you, but we're hoping that the community sees that it's important to us to solve problems creatively, and we hope that they find it compelling enough to share with the community how they solve those problems. Again, the collaborative of educators, if you will. We want those people sharing information with each other and sharing information with us, because we don't pretend to know the best way to do things. But if we give you guys the tools to solve problems more effectively, then we'll learn from them, and then we'll make it better. I'm not sure if that directly answered the question or not.
Yeah, I think that that answers most of it. And along with that, I wanted to ask about the crafting and that kind of thing. We talked earlier about how you really didn't want, we're trying to move away from types of things that kind of hold the player hand and things like that. Along with that, are we, again, I go with the expectations, but I'm wondering if we're going to see a lot of discovery have to happen before we kind of get the idea of what can be crafted and that kind of stuff. I mean, you're not going to
Yeah.
give out like a list of what can be created with what, that kind of thing.
No, unfortunately not. And that's the bummer about this. This is the weirdest thing in the world. Like, we really have to stick to our laurels in this one, because we have gotten offers from a lot of awesome wikis like IGN and Curse and Wowhead wanted to make a tug head for us, and they would have put a blast out to millions of people to come check out Tug, and that would have been phenomenal exposure. But it is so incredibly important to apply the aspect of discovery to this game, that we just had to forego that kind of exposure as a whole. So we're not going to expose that information to anybody. Part of what we're doing within the community is watching how the wiki progresses and expands, and we will have a point system. Actually, we're building another website right now that essentially will function like, it's funny, but like a traditional role-playing game, where people will have their own stats and their own levels and quote-unquote classes based on what they do within and outside of the community. But people that are solving problems or challenging each other on the wikis are going to be treated differently, not better for worse, but they may wink wink get different kinds of systems, or different kinds of rewards, or different kinds of acknowledgement, or maybe the people that are solving a lot of problems we see are potential scientists that we think should pursue certain kind of education, and we may bring them in to do research with us just to test it out and see how it works. People are going to be doing a lot of different things, and again, if, like you pointed out yourself, if we solve those problems and just tell them how to do these things, then how do we know who's who? How do we know what value people have, or how do the people know what value they really have if they don't give the opportunity to actually show that value?
Sure. In terms of the plant life and the flora and the world itself, are we staying away from sort of like a fantasy aspect and kind of within reason, obviously, sticking to things that we would see in real life as far as the plants and things like that, or are the artists really trying to come up with some brand new stuff maybe we've never seen before?
It's a blend. There certainly will be things that need to exist that are logical to allow people to adapt to those, understanding of what those things are. Like, you guys already saw the gourd. You can do a lot with the gourd. We're not going to say exactly what, but yeah, you can play around with it, and do different things. And this is the first phase of it, and it is a fantasy environment, so there will be different variations of these things. not officially saying it, but there could be variations of dimensions that could change things exponentially over time and change the entire outcome of the way the community interacts. And that could change the logical setting to a more fantastic but still consistent setting. So yeah, I mean, we have a fantasy environment. We're gonna have fun with it for sure. We're not just gonna stick to roses and gourds and watermelons. We'll put in some snozzberries and Finkel dews and all kinds of fun stuff.
Well, that sounds great. In terms of the seed itself, the player, um, somebody's wondering if this will continue, the seed will continue to develop or grow or age as you're offline, or is this something that you're only going to see, when you're actively playing the game?
Well, we need to play with that a lot. Um, I think a lot of people are thinking age is a factor of time, period. But in fact, it could be that for us, age is a factor of progression. How much experience, quote unquote, you have in the world equates to how much interaction you have in the world. So it's difficult to say. What our thinking is now, initially, our thinking is that it will start as a child. You'll have X amount of time playing as a child. After you've had X amount of time playing, you would grow. After that, you had a little bit more time playing, and then you'd grow again. And then, as an adult, you would likely stop growing there, but there will be other ways of you getting older that would be a more fantastic explanation, right? Again, we have a fantasy environment. We're certainly going to take advantage of that kind of freedom. There will be logic to it and consistency, and it will be adapted, to the lore of mythology. But we definitely got to play with it and make sure it fits, and that
Okay.
it's fun, of course.
That's a great question. What about somebody wondered about the Kickstarter stretch goals a little bit. Let's talk about that for a second. I know traditionally this is something that developers put into their Kickstarter to try and give people a reason to continue, giving what they can to help fund the development of the game. What they're wondering is these stretch goal specifics that you've already set for the stretch goals. Are these things that were likely to be developed either way over time anyway? Are these things that could potentially make it into the game even if the stretch goal itself isn't met? For example, like the magic, enchanting, that kind of stuff. Are we likely to see something like that develop, even perhaps if it doesn't reach the goal, but maybe down the line someplace? Or are they aspects that may not come at all if that goal isn't met?
Kind of both-ish. The reality of this is that we're building to what we say we're building, and this is because this is what we have the time to support. It's not a matter of us trying to make money off this thing. It's about us, making something compelling and having the budget to do so. So when we had the Kickstarter goal, this is a step back, kind of important. I don't think the question's been asked publicly enough, but people ask if we can get this stuff done. But we have some money saved up before we even asked for the Kickstarter, and we tried to make it clear in the Kickstarter campaign that it was for art support and to get a little bit extra help to get some tools made. And that's really all that Kickstarter money was for. And then people ended up being more excited about stuff. So we said, okay, well, I guess we can ask for some more money if they want to get more stuff done. We certainly did want to get those things finished, but how quickly we'd get it done, we wouldn't know, because is it a matter of us being focused on full time, or do we have part-time jobs doing it, or do we just drop it and let the modders do it themselves? We're going to get to a certain point where the community is going to take it in their own hands. And it's an interesting proposition for us too, because what we're saying is that we're opening up all the tools to the community, and if we cannot prove ourselves as technologists or designers or artists, then the community doesn't have to support us anymore, because they don't have to spend any money and they don't have to pledge any more money, and they have no reason to tell anybody else about it because the modders have effectively taken over, and that's fine. But at that point, we wouldn't have the support of the game anymore, and then we can only support it as much as the community supports it, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just double check my list of questions from the viewers here. I think we've added some more. And I guess back to the AI for one last question here. It looks like they're wondering emergent behavior when it comes to AI and their interactions with players. and they're wondering if this is something that is planned for the game or if it's prohibitively expensive to develop something like that.
Um, Expensive as in cost of the technology, or time for us, I guess, is what needs to be defined.
Um, I guess it
Both.
looks like that regards to time to develop. I guess that's probably what they're hinting towards.
Um, there are a few ways we can go out doing the AI. Well, one is it's going to be scriptable too, so that's important to consider. So you guys could make more and more complex systems and plug them into machine learning algorithms with parse information and feed them back. So in theory, even if we can't do it, another academic institution could take it and run with it. Now, emergent behavior is something that may become expensive. Again, it's processing more and more information with a lot of potential outputs and variations. We will certainly experiment with it because we think it'd be a lot of fun. Now, we do know that we're making a lot of unique responses to interactions that will make it feel slightly more emergent. Granted, we can't guarantee we can do thousands of responses to certain interactions, but enough to allow players to experiment and find something new or have certain aha moments, if you will. I think what we probably could do, and a few of us may end up doing, is that we could take a lot of the systems out of the game and then play with what would be responsive AI or dynamic responsive AI or machine learning human responsive AI, what I think is being referred to as emergent AI. And we can make it just that system in a sandbox about that kind of AI, about that kind of system or function, and then get a small community of scripters and modders with us to help us do it, and then see how expensive it is on computationally on the engine itself. And if it's too taxing, then maybe we just can't get it done. But the cool thing about this is that if we do have the opportunity to really support this thing over the next year, two, goodness, maybe 10, if all things align, when hardware is where it is in 5 years or 2 years or 10 years, there's no reason why we can't revisit that and all the work we've done on the side with that community, plug it in and make the game feel that much more realistic or that much more quote unquote emergent with the AI or interaction stuff.
Okay. Well, I have one last question from Reddit that I'd like to address, and then I think we'll just move on into just kind of hanging out and just chatting with the viewers and such. The last question I wanted to ask, and I think that we've already kind of touched on this, so it'd probably be easy to be brief, was from Reddit was that the as far as systems like creatures crafting, character development, things like that, these are all things that should be showing up in sort of the beta, right? Because the alpha, as you've discussed earlier, is really more about refining the technology behind everything so that you can implement those systems, right?
Yeah, the safest thing to say is yes. Now we do often plan for a worst case. Now it's possible we can get those systems in, but we just don't want to create any false expectations right now. Again, small team, we want to focus on making things perfect. We are working on AI systems during the beta phase. So it is quite possible that we'll have systems done, plug them into an animation, have a few animals running around to start playing with. At least people get an idea of the way it works. Um, and then having that be in response to a crafting system and plugging them in, it's not horribly difficult to do. But again, a lot of this is going to come down to where the value proposition is for the community. Because if we get to a certain point that's critical for development and say, okay, we've finished X, Y, and Z, or X and Y, should we go this direction or this direction? And the majority consensus is another one for a very compelling reason, then we're going to go in that direction instead.
Okay. Well, that's definitely the extent of the questions that I had for sort of our formal interview here. So if you have someplace else to be, I certainly understand. But if you want to hang out and sit and chat with us, that's perfectly fine too. At this time, I'm going to go ahead, though, and take just a couple seconds here, a couple minute break, and I'm going to get some games given out to the folks that have joined us this evening. I want to give them out as a little bit of a thank you for everybody that's joined. In case you do have to go someplace or what have you, I know I want to thank you for joining us this evening and answering all the questions that you have. I look forward to any and all future interactions we have as well.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me for the shenanigans.